you looked on your calendar this morning and most of you saw the year 2021, but in fact, we're going to go ahead 10 years because our proposition for the conversation we're about to have is that it's already 2031. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward. At least the proposition is straightforward. And that is that ideas that were sitting out there for 10 or 15 years, as often happens in a crisis, were fast forwarded because of the global pandemic. And so many of the better ideas that we've been talking about for a long, long time found themselves now in play in communities around the world. So what we decided to do was to open today by bringing in our sort of big thinkers, the people we really rely on when we talk about the future and what's going on, to have a conversation about, in fact, whether it really is 2031. So I'm just delighted to bring, two people together that I just enjoy talking to, irrespective of the circumstances. The first person is Dr. Rick Huijbregts, the Vice President for Strategy and Innovation at George Brown College. Rick is known as a master strategist, researcher, teacher, and thinker in the areas of the evolution and adoption of digital tools for transformation. So I wrote that about you, Rick. So if I'm wrong, you let me know. That's how I see you.
Very kind of you. Thanks, Lou. Great seeing you.
Likewise. I just want to tell people a little more about you because your credentials are those of a Renaissance man, and they're impeccable in our space. Before joining George Brown College, you spent 12 years with Cisco, most recently as the VP of Digital Transformation and Innovation up in Cisco, Canada. You were awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal in 2012 for your work in municipal innovation. So Dr. Huijbregts is a faculty member as well at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design Executive Education, where he focuses on smart cities, smart buildings, and digital transformation. And I had the great privilege of being invited to his class to talk a little bit about ICF, and he was talking about it at Harvard. So Rick, it's great to see you again.
Thank you. Likewise.
Rick is going to be joined by someone who many of you know in our movement, just because of his accomplishments around the globe. Joost Helms is the director of the Eindhoven International Projects Office, EIPO, E-I-P-O. Joost was instrumental in that city's capture of the 2011 Intelligent Community of the Year Award after 3 tries. With the organization he now runs Joost advises other cities around the world on their transformation potential in a very hands-on way. It's a great program that they have, and if you want to accelerate your community, you should be talking to them. He was taught the ICF method and concept, and he has taught it along with the triple helix that was perfected during his tenure in Eindhoven, and he's taught it throughout the world to great success. Most notably, I think, in the nation of Vietnam, which has begun to embrace our method again very aggressively, and the nation is being transformed rapidly, as it is in other places where he's working, and in large part, it's because of Joost and his colleague, Peter Porten. So Joost, it's great for you to be able to make the time to have this conversation. Welcome.
Thank you, Lou. It's great to be on this panel. It's great to see all of you again, although in a virtual way. But we'll come back to that later, probably the need of human interactions compared to the ease of working online. But it's great to be here. It's good to see that ICF is going forward with their work, and looking forward to next year to meet live again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me start off with our conversation. I mentioned at the outset that there are ideas and policies that have now begun to harden and get moved into the mainstream as a result of COVID. Rick, what ideas or policies that were talked about or were lingering, or that we're talking about like we were 20 years ago, are now, in your view, being accelerated into the light of those unintended consequences of COVID-19? Is there anything out there that you've seen that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I'd love to share a thought or two. Before that, I just want to also thanks for putting me together with Joost. I'm born and raised in Eindhoven. I haven't been in Eindhoven in a long time. I visit my parents now and then, and Joost and his group have really transformed the city from a dull Phillips town to, I think, a happening place. And I think all the intelligent community principles that they have applied there, the truth is that's 2031 now, right there. So I look forward to visiting again once we're allowed.
So it's a homecoming today.
It almost is.
I can also continue in Dutch, right, Rick?
We could, yes.
Please don't, guys. I can't translate for you.
I think there's, arguably everything has accelerated because of the last year and a half. I think where a lot of communities still were trying to figure out how to get it done, and maybe not just communities, even the federal levels, is to provide proper connectivity to every outskirt of every community and make sure everyone truly can participate. We have been able to get away with not doing a great job on that. I think that time has passed. I think now with, and thanks to COVID and working from home, and I think this whole kind of acceleration of digitally communicating and connecting, I think even further required the need for broadband. And I do think we see around the world, and certainly in Canada too, an accelerated level of conversation around increasing connectivity and broadband access to all in an affordable way. And we're not the most affordable country when it comes to broadband access. So we still have ways to go, but I think it's sped up. I do think a connection to that is cyber. I think, I know maybe not that seemingly relevant, but I think now we've seen phishing attacks and ransomware attacks more than double in the last year. And when we now all participate kind of in this digital economy in different ways, and even more than ever before depend on it, I think digital literacy and awareness of cyber and how we participate in this, I think is going to be, and already is today, way more prominent than it probably was a year and a half ago.
Rick, you mentioned cyber, and I was also going to ask you about design, building design, the changes we might see. But since you asked me about cyber, do you think, I mean, I live in the United States where I'm sure this happened, but is it your sense that we got kind of caught, as they say again in New York, with your pants down? Did we get caught unaware? Did cyber hit us much quicker than we thought it could? Cyber attacks, that is.
I think IT folks among us knew that this was happening. I don't think we paid attention to it in boardrooms and city halls probably to the level it deserved. I think that has changed really, really rapidly. And actually in the US, we've seen some of the greatest attacks only in the last few weeks that have actually, that put the resilience of a community at risk. The whole oil pipeline hack, the water treatment in Florida hack, the food, the supply, the meat plant hack, and they're paying millions and millions of dollars to get access to their data again. Yeah, I think it has actually quite a ripple effect on how we think about communities and feeding ourselves and living and learning. And I know, Lou, we tried to prep for this, and I've been MIA. It's because we've just undergone this with the college, and our systems are still down now 3 weeks in.
Wow.
Because of this. And we're trying to teach and educate students. So when we think about education, healthcare, hospital down the street in Toronto, the OR got hacked. It becomes so mainstream that I think now this is a boardroom conversation. And I do think it's much more prominent as to when we think about all the aspects of having intelligent communities, that it must be prioritized.
Yeah, and thanks, Rick. I didn't realize that. I'm going to circle back at the end. I'm going to ask you, what should the conversations about cyber be looking like in 2031? Where do we want to get to in our intelligent communities and others? Because I think it's as you say, it is the quintessential question right now. And if you guys are getting hacked, if hospitals are getting hacked, we've got a big challenge ahead of us. Joost, I'm going to refer the first question to you as well. You spend a lot of time on the road, and of course, as we know, Eindhoven is the center of the world in many ways for the intelligent community movement. What ideas have gotten fast forwarded? Have you seen anything move along that you had hoped maybe 5 or 10 years ago when we met might get moved forward?
Yeah, sure. Some things we hoped, some things we saw coming, but also we see some changes that might have unexpected effects as well. First of all, as you and Rick were also discussing it, the whole digitalization of everything, of businesses, of education, of the workplace. Obviously, that has made a big leap forward. And the interesting thing, working both in Europe and developed world as well as emerging regions like Vietnam, like Thailand, is to see how the effects differ. Where Rick is now pointing out also some of the uncomfortable feelings that you feel like we have been lagging it behind on this. We should have been further ahead already. We can also see at the same time that, especially in emerging countries, they actually are leaping forward because they also have to make the digitalization a process, but their starting point is different. So they have a lot of room for investment, which they are now investing in a much smarter way maybe than we have been doing before. And so that will also change something about the relations between like the developed world and the emerging markets. And the same when you look at the whole supply chain changes. COVID obviously disturbed a lot of the global supply chains in a logistic way, but also in shortage of materials, travel restrictions, etc. And at first, a lot of people and businesses, especially in Europe, in the US, were all talking about we're going to bring production back home, the reshoring. But obviously, in the long run, the fastest growing consumer markets are not in Europe and US. They will be especially in Southeast Asia and other future emerging regions. So at the same time, there will also be higher added value parts of the supply chain moving to those regions, which is obviously very good in the fast development of a country like Vietnam. But it's also something we should realize in our own countries, that it's even more important to get really good connected between the different parts of the world.
Yes. And of course, we wrote a book called Seizing Your Destiny, which meant whatever you can do at home to strengthen your economy and your ecosystem that doesn't negatively impact the rest of the world, you should be doing that. You should be thinking about that. And maybe that kind of thinking gets accelerated here. Joost, I also wanted to ask you before I go back to Rick, how is the digital transformation taking place in Southeast Asia, some of the newer emerging economies, Thailand, Vietnam, again, where you guys do work? Is there an understanding that broadband needs to be government funded, or how is that digital transformation being approached? If you can just maybe speak in somewhat general terms or go as specific as you need to go.
In general terms, you can see in every country, region we work, that the whole broadband connections, it's really on top of every list. And it's not so much in trying to connect every home to a fixed solution, but especially speeding up the rollout of 5G, which is in Vietnam and not that far behind when you compare it to Europe. So they're speeding up really fast. There's a lot of investment in that, not only because also at this moment in Vietnam, almost everybody is working from home. And so they really, really were in need of better broadband connections, but also because they see the necessary transformation of the industry using more advanced manufacturing technologies, which also has been talked about a long time, Industry 4.0, IoT, etc. But now with the speed of digitalization, they're actually starting to implement it as well. And in my opinion, that is now going much faster than we had expected when we started working there like 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, is it government driven primarily?
Yes, primarily, but government mostly in partnership with private investors. That can be the large telecom companies in Vietnam, but also a lot of Japanese and Korean, Taiwanese companies involved, because those are also the biggest investors in the industry in Vietnam. So obviously, it has a double advantage for them as well, being an investor and also facilitating their own industry or their own investments as well.
Yeah, we were delighted that we were able to match up our ICF Taiwan organization with the Vietnamese, who were just eager to learn. So that's been a good relationship. Hey, Rick, Yust was talking about Asian communities working from home, which is a whole issue in and of itself. We could do a whole discussion about that. But I want to ask you, as an educator, what's going to happen to the educational model when people understand that they can learn at home, that information needs to be accessed differently, that we need to build a knowledge workforce that really is a pathless land right now? Where is that going to go over the next 10 years?
Yeah, that is that is something that keeps us, being a college, polytechnic institution in Canada, up at night. And I think we thought we would have more time to ride the wave of disruption in education. But again, I think the pandemic accelerated that. What we once thought, and I say once thought, which is a year and a half ago, was our kind of unique value proposition. You come to college, downtown Toronto, we have the greatest facilities, we have labs where you can do hands-on learning. All that suddenly was null and void in March of 2020, and we had to go online and suddenly face a world of competition and other offerings that we frankly poo-pooed before that, but now is real. We also now see, and I know what's happening, but I think it's happening faster now, where employers say, I need the right skilled people now, not 4 years from now. So the notion of micro-credentials, shorter learning, boosts of learning, the idea of lifelong learning, because through broadband, I can take a course from MIT and from Shanghai, wherever in the world, if you will, and learn what I need, when I need it,
right,
in the time and pace that I need it, which is very different from post-secondary education, where I come in set times to campus, and I sit in the classroom, and I learn in a very kind of structured way. And there's value to all that. I don't want to dismiss that form of education, but where I think once we maybe were kind of on the pedestal as the example of post-secondary education, I think that time is up. So online learning, corporations getting into it, dealing, and we saw this, of course, but LinkedIn, Google certificates being launched in the last year. Private career colleges, private career colleges, which already completely reshaped the education landscape in Australia. It's now happening in Canada. And again, if we as post-secondary large institutions just sit back on our laurels and think, well, we have the brand, we have the governance support, we will lose. And I know Craig Christensen once said it in the US, before he passed, that half of US colleges would be gone by 2025. I think we're going to be in the same type of pressure because government funding can't keep up with what employers are asking from us and our students. And that disruption and transformation for the next decade in education will be way more than the last 50 years, what we have seen.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. But I'm thinking about that beautiful design school in Harvard where you you invited me to speak, that big expensive building and that beautiful campus. And actually I remember that day because there was a World Cup match and we had about 17 German students, right? We had to stop the course to watch them play. But I was thinking about that building and what's going to happen to that by 2031 if your vision or your view of it comes to pass, and it seems like it is. I mean, in many cases, I've heard parents talk about colleges as rackets. It's a 4-year racket. Why am I paying for this? This is not lifelong education.
Yeah.
My kid probably won't even get a job. So which courses, what are we going to have to learn over the next 10 years to be part of intelligent communities?
Yeah. So first, Harvard will always be Harvard. And I think there's the few institutions that people still be happy to pay 60 grand per year just for tuition, but the vast majority of other post-secondary education are not going to be in that luxury position. So I think we all have to, in Canada, for us to launch a post-secondary degree, it takes 4 to 5 years from getting permits and approvals and developing it, getting the government to buy in. That just doesn't work anymore. We need to co-create with employers, with the community, in the community. And I think it's the only way to really put our finger on kind of local needs and start to meet those needs. And frankly, over the next decade, it probably will shift, and it may even be different by community. Maybe highly, vertical farming, or urban agriculture or urban manufacturing, whereas it could be something else for another community. So I think communities actually should have much more involvement and say in what skills are being made available or developed. And I would love to see more communities partner with academic institutions, even if they're not in the city, because there's always university and college cities that have the advantage of access. But there's lots of communities that don't have campuses, but that now through online delivery and alternative teaching and the ways of teaching and learning, we actually can start to cater to the specific needs. And it may change 3 more times before we hit 2031. And I think that is how the future is going to be. And the one institution that nails that interaction and can create those partnerships with municipalities and communities, I think will win this game.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The specificity of education, but even per community. Joost, in the time we have left, we've got about 13 minutes left. You've spent time in great intelligent communities. You've seen evolving intelligent communities, and there are a lot of them. I mentioned while we have hundreds of communities that we evaluate for our awards, there are hundreds more that are practicing the ICF method and trying to get on the path that Eindhoven and Bindong and Northern Ireland and some of the other places where you've worked are on. As you look forward and advise more leaders, which you guys do, what in your view over the next 10 years will present the most challenges and the biggest rewards for communities if they go down the path that you and Rick have been speaking about today?
Well, I think a lot of the challenges remain the same, because we always have been preaching and practicing the importance of global connections, tapping into networks like ICF, to learn from others. Why should you invent yourself what somebody else has already successfully implemented? So I think that will remain the most important challenge. Collaboration, not only within your own community, but also outside your community, as Rick also stressed out, looking into the potential of connecting to knowledge centers outside your own community.
Can I stop you there, Joost? Because what is the specific challenge of collaboration in either internally or outside? Is there one thing that you and your team have observed that prevents great collaboration from happening?
Well, obviously, I think the biggest barrier is always either the ego or the fear of being the underlying party. There's still too many people in the world, too many cities, regions who think they are the best, and they don't need to learn anything more. I think that's a big threat. But also the other way around, there's a lot of communities and city leaders also who fear that they might not be far enough to be an equal partner with some other places.
Right.
And I truly believe that if you are open to share your ambitions and to share your goals in a very open way, and you can find a connection where both can benefit, then all of these issues are no longer a matter anymore, because that's it's just about helping each other forward, and obviously everybody wants to profit, and if you dare to speak out about that and be open and vulnerable, then will be the most easy way to find where the profit is for all parties involved.
And you guys spend a lot of time working on that aspect, that sort of human dimension, don't you? I mean, I don't know how much of your time, but I've seen you guys at work. You're kind of part psychiatrist, part master of business, part visionary for the future of their intelligent community. But you do spend a lot of time on that, don't you?
Yeah, well, I would not call myself a psychiatrist or anything.
You've been my psychiatrist on a few drinking sessions, so yeah.
Now, I rather refer to us as connectors. We want to share our knowledge, our experience, but also our network. We want to bring people together because we truly believe if you just make the connection and add value, then people will also respect that and reward that eventually also in the business model.
Yeah.
So basically, it's all about connecting. And one thing you just mentioned before, and also Rick, when you're discussing about the physical part, that's also a very interesting one. The buildings, how do we develop our cities? In Vietnam, as you know, in Minh Dinh, but also in Thailand, we're working with development teams for new cities. How are you going to design your city? And I think that the last 1.5 year, everybody working online also made us aware of the need of coming together. Coming together to share ideas, but not in the same way as before, but in different ways, in hybrid ways. And I personally really love the idea of that, the 15-minute city, where not the office place is the central part of your life anymore, but basically your own community. And in that light, if you can bring in, for instance, Rick, from a college university, maybe if you have more co-locations throughout these different communities where you can partner with. So people have easy access to their work, both online as offline, to knowledge, to other partners, to other businesses, to the government. I think that will really change the way we plan, design, build, and also use our cities in the future.
Yeah. Rick, sort of picking up on what you said about the challenges and, of course, the rewards, because if you do it right, you do create the kind of community that is sustainable for generations. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, do cities in Canada have an edge in that regard in any way? Because we've gotten a lot of intelligent community out of Canada, but does Canada have an edge over the next 10 years, do you think, because of their ability to collaborate, or are they got bigger challenges in other places?
We have lots of big challenges as a nation to address and to resolve. I do agree that I think we're probably reasonably well off in the collaboration area. That may be a Canadian kind of culture thing. I think it's relatively easy to put the right stakeholders around the table. I don't disagree with Joost around egos and who's on first and am I important enough to get the airtime. I think there's still diverging intentions that aren't always clear. And having been with Cisco, of course, the big corporation at the table with its intentions, which really was routers and switches and infrastructure at the end of the day, right? So how to break through that, I think the Canadians do well. And I think you see that when you do your travels and you see the communities really rally around, I guess, common challenges or common goals. I do think we have a challenge on the broadband issue still. We still have too many communities that are not properly kind of connected the way it should be. And then, of course, we're still dealing, I think, with decolonialization, the indigenization that in reality, I think, are obstacles to us truly as a nation kind of amplify and mobilize the whole real intelligent community movement. But we are super blessed to have John Young be a Canadian, and you yourself, I think, are honorary Canadian, if I'm not mistaken. So I think
I'm waiting for the premier to give me that award. Yeah.
So we certainly get all the help we need here.
Yeah. In the 6 minutes or so that we have left, I'm gonna ask you both a question. Now, Rick, in your instance, I want to circle back and again go to managing the cyber infrastructure in 2031. You said at the outset that it is a big problem, and you guys are experiencing it there at your own university as we speak. What should the conversation be for community leaders going down the road to make sure that they have sustainability on the cyber side as well? And then, Joost, I've got a final question for you.
Yeah, I think just asking that question would be a great starting point. If you think about an Estonia, and maybe there's people here on the call are watching from there that, of course, done an amazing amount of work digitizing every service. But if they would undergo what we just went through as a college, I'd be very nervous living in Estonia in terms of what happens to my data. Where is my data? Has it been breached or not? So having cyber at the beginning, at the table, I think is critical. I know it's a techie thing, and I know when we talk about intelligent communities, it's way beyond the technology. The technology is just an enabler, but if cyber is not part of that conversation and designed in every service delivery and every experience, I think we may find ourselves in trouble 10 years from now. That said, hopefully 10 years from now, our digital literacy will have improved. We will all be more aware of what it means to truly live in a digital world, and hopefully there's some more kind of people opportunities to prevent or protect ourselves.
Yeah, and our digital hygiene as well. Estonia, one of the reasons they were named Intelligent Community of the Year was because of the things that they've done in cyber. They've been battling the Russians, for years to keep the Russians out of there, and relatively successfully. More so than my country, the United States. So I think it's right. You ask it's just the old Socratic method. You ask the question first because the answer is presumed in the question, and you arrive at it. Joost, final question. As I say, you've done some great work in your own city. You and Peter Porten now are out in the world spreading this mission of intelligent communities. Design for me the intelligent community of 2031. What will be the more significant features that you will say you community need to be in order for you to get the stamp of approval from Joost Helms? The good stamp, the big stamp there.
First of all, Lou, as you know, because we very much agree on this, there is no such blueprint for an intelligent community or a smart city. I mean, every city, every community is different, and that's a good thing. And obviously, digitalization and all the ICF indicators are, I think, very important. I think, especially if you refer to what has been changed through the COVID pandemic, what should be getting more attention to be this intelligence community back in, or further on in 2031. I think that inclusion should be much more important. Inclusivity has been a big debate, especially in Europe and in the US over the recent years. How we keep our cities affordable also for a teacher or a policeman. I think during this pandemic, we have seen how crucial the people behind the scenes are. Our policemen, our healthcare workers, another time our healthcare workers, because they're so damn important. Our teachers, cleaners, people working in maintenance. So I think that we should never forget that and make sure they get greater reward, and we make sure that our cities are affordable for them, because that will make a real inclusive and, in my part, sustainable, intelligent community.
Right, and they are knowledge workers, aren't they? At the end of the day,
yes, definitely.
They're critical path. Rick, I've got about a minute here. I'm getting criticized for asking you guys tough questions, but you're knocking them off pretty easily. Generally, do you agree with that view, or is there something you'd like to refine with regard to the intelligent community of 2031? It's a pretty strong view.
I mean, I think the point Joost made, not every community is the same, and the starting points are very different. So I agree with Joost's perspectives. I do think if it's done well through inclusion, and I do think if we talked about collaboration, there's kind of two probably key anchors or staples on top of which we can tackle so many challenges. And I know we talked about cyber, and we talked about education and connectivity. We didn't talk, and I know time is up, but healthy cities. And I think the whole pandemic probably shined a new light.
Yes.
A new light. Yeah.
Shined a new light. That's right.
On healthy buildings, healthy environments, social distancing. And I think how we design our cities is going to be changed as well. And it's all part of, I think, the narrative here.
Yeah, and that's another conversation you and I will have in a future event. Well, as we say, whenever you want an answer to a hard question, you call someone from the Netherlands and they'll give you a good answer. So, gentlemen, thanks so much for making the time. Rick, it's great to see you again. It's been a while. Joost, it's always great to see you, and we really honor and appreciate all you've done for people around the world in your various disciplines. So, best of luck going forward.
And congratulations to your team for keeping beating this drum and keeping going this long and keep guiding us. So thanks.
You bet.
Thank you. Thanks also the audience for listening to us. And Rick, look forward to meeting you when you visit Eindhoven.
Yes, for sure. Thanks, Joost.
Sounds good. Dinner in Eindhoven, and I've done that. It's wonderful.